Welcome, everybody. I'm Sue Sherman with the Lakeshore Home Builders Association. We're excited to have, I guess this is the first maybe of some of our Zoom classes that we're going to do. And I was thinking, since we have such a small group, that I would encourage you all, if you have questions or whatever, if you want to just speak up, it should be fine. The other thing is, if people are willing, maybe if you want to introduce yourself, and if you had anything particular that you were hoping to gain from this session, you could mention that. You don't have to have something, but if you do have something, it might help Nate to make sure and touch on it. So we'll start with Jason, since he has his camera on and he's willing to introduce himself.
Ever since you yelled at me for not having my camera on means that I'm not paying attention, I figured I better put it on. I'm Jason Slank from Overijssel Lumber. We've got lumber yards in Holland, Douglas, and South Haven, expanding down to Stevensville now as a new location soon. Yeah, I guess as far as hoping to learn, I think any free advice I can ever get for tax avoidance and kind of year-end planning, taking money out at the end of a hard worked year, bonuses versus dividends, and some of the different ways to do that and implications that those might have.
Awesome, thank you. Does anyone else want to introduce themselves?
I'm Ricky Johnson. I'm with Anchor Rock Construction, and I am just learning what questions to ask. And I understand this is about financial planning, but I'm also interested in any input Nate has on some of the special provisions that we currently have going because of the COVID regulations.
Okay, thanks. Anybody
Hi,
else?
this is Andrew Baker over at Macatawa Bank, and I'll be leaving my camera off, unfortunately. Probably going to end up multitasking, but yeah, definitely always interested, like Jason said, in hearing, any kind of free advice or financial planning stuff. So yeah, it kind of drew my attention, so I thought I would register.
Great, thanks so much. Just want to also mention to this group that we're always looking for topics for classes. So if you have something that you wish to see, please let me know. You know, we're small enough that we can be nimble and provide the things that you're looking for. And if something comes up in this conversation as a follow-up, I'll look into that as well. So anyway, I'm going to just turn it straight over to Nate Baumann, our speaker today, and he can kind of introduce himself and then just go from there. But we really appreciate him presenting today. He's one of our members, and we love to get our members speaking on their areas of expertise.
Thank you.
I'll turn it over to Nate.
All right, I'm trying to speak up here. If it's hard to hear me, let me know and I'll start yelling in my office. But I'm going to share my screen here. I know that Sue has it being recorded, so I'm gonna try to cover as much as I can, and even if some of it's not pertaining directly to the people on this call directly right now, if it gets shared with other members in the future, hopefully it's helpful to them. So I'm going to share my screen. I got a PowerPoint just to keep me on topic here, and we'll get rolling. Just a quick note about myself. So I spent 10 years in the building industry, started out working for Jack Vander, then did a year-plus stint excavating, and then back into the building trades again. So, and then after that, the last 15 years, financial planning. So again, I've got a lot of clients that I continue in the buildings trade. I love being connected to it, thus still being a member of the HBA. So my goal here really is just to educate and encourage, I think, and maybe just give a few ideas of things to think about, or maybe put some ideas in your head of things that you could do for your own financial plan. My contact information will be at the end. Feel free to get a hold of me if you have a question. I don't mind that at all. I'm not gonna take your email and then hunt you down. Just if you've got any questions on this or anything in the future, please feel free to to reach out. So again, my goal here is to educate quickly, and I'm going to try to give you as much information as I can without feeling like I'm going to overpower you here. There's a lot of topics I have in here. And then, like I said, at the end, or we've got a small group, if you got a question, just interrupt me and jump in. So, here we go. Workplace plans. For some of you who are business owners, this may have a little bit more to do with those of you who kind of are, for lack of a better term, stuck with what the company has. But let me just go over some of the benefits real quickly. So 401k, everybody knows about them. The benefits of 401k are a higher annual contribution amount. So 19.5 is what you can contribute as an employee. If you're 50 and older, you can contribute another $6,500, which puts you to 26 grand a year. That's aside from what your employer will put in as a contribution. The other benefit to 401ks is oftentimes you can have a Roth 401k or a traditional 401k option. We'll talk about the difference between Roths and traditionals in a moment, but basically the difference real quickly is a traditional 401k is pre-tax and then taxed as it comes out. A Roth 401k is post-tax and not taxed when it comes out. And so that gives you a little bit of a diversification in tax as you're withdrawing these funds in retirement. Downside to a 401k, they're typically a little bit clunkier to administer and a little bit more expensive. So typically you can figure between $1,000 and $1,500 a year in administrative costs. And so it's not typically as clean. A simple IRA is, as it sounds, it's simple. It's easier to administer. We see a lot of smaller businesses who want to start dabbling in retirement plans for their employees coming into a simple IRA. The contribution limit for the employee is lower. It's $13,500, and then another $3,000 if you're 50 and older. So it's about a $10,000 contribution limit difference. Oftentimes for an employee that doesn't make a big difference, because a lot of times you don't see a typical employee contributing, $13,000 a year to a plan. However, for business owners, oftentimes that is the case where they say, I don't want a simple IRA because I can't contribute enough into it. I'm going to do a 401k. But again, there's no real administration cost to it. It's very easy to get going and administer. So a great idea for a first plan, or for it can serve its purpose for a long time if that's really all the company needs. A SEP IRA, I won't go into it a great deal, but a SEP is really beneficial if you're a sole proprietor or they're close to it. Your contribution limits are almost $60,000 a year. However, the downside is if you have employees and you're putting 60 in for yourself, you almost have to match that for employees. So it's not great if you've got a bunch of employees because your contribution limits are still so high. But there again, it's an easier one if you're self-employed or close to it to get it set up and to get money set aside. So those are the three common workplace plans. Personal retirement, here we are again on the traditional IRA versus the Roth IRA. Traditional is post-tax, right? Or pre-tax, I'm sorry. So it goes in before you're taxed on it, grows tax-free. Downside is when you take it out, it's taxed to you. There is a limit to it. You can put $6,000 a year in, another $1,000 if you're over 50. If you have a workplace plan, typically you can't deduct traditional IRAs. So it's kind of a one or the other type of a thing. Roth IRA, pre-tax, There again, $6,000 annual limit, another $1,000 if you're over 50. Grows tax-free. When it comes out, it's tax-free as well. One quick note on the Roth. With a Roth IRA, you can't pull earnings out until you're 59 and a half. This is very typical with pretty much any retirement plan you're dealing with. The difference with a Roth, though, is the principal that you put in can come out at any time, tax-free, penalty-free. So if you put $1,000 into a Roth and you're 30 years old, it grows to $2,000 and you have an emergency, you need to get to money, you can pull the $1,000 that you put in back out of a Roth, penalty-free, tax-free. One of the places we see this used a lot is for those who say, hey, I've got a little bit of extra money. I don't dare put it into a retirement account because what if I need it for something? Or, hey, I'm saving for down the road for kids' college. Sometimes we'll see people put money in here. You're saving it. The benefit is it grows tax-free, and you get down the road and either an emergency happens or you want to use it for kids' college. Well, take out the money that you put into it, use it for what you're saving it for, and then you've got this bonus of your growth, hopefully, that then you'll have to wait to 59 and a half to pull it out. But you know, you can often solve two problems using a Roth IRA. So I'm a huge fan of them. So look into that if that's something you're interested in. Just wanted to touch on two other things. Health savings accounts, HSAs. This is the best deal the government will ever give you. So contributions to a health savings account go in tax-free. They grow tax-free. And as long as you use them for qualified health insurance or qualified health expenses, they come out tax-free. There's a few things. You have to be in a health insurance plan that is considered high deductible. Lately, that's not hard to get to, but you can't contribute to an HSA unless it's a qualified, attached to a qualified plan. But HSAs themselves are not like flex spending. You don't have to spend them by the end of the year. You can put it in, you can invest it however you want, and for as long as you want. And you do not have to have those held at any particular custodian. And then the other piece is non-qualified savings. So there's a number of other places you can save money that's outside of retirement. A trust account, a joint account, an individual account, all can be brokerage accounts, places that you put it that's more liquid, right? So in those cases, it's always after-tax money. The tax that you pay on it is ongoing. So you're paying dividends and capital gains as you realize those in any given year. However, there's no restrictions on when you can pull money out of these, right? And so some of it's not necessarily a bad thing to have taxable money going as well. Diversification. I just wanted to touch on this real quickly. So one of the big things we see with HBA members is that they're scared to put money into the stock market. So it's something that they aren't overly comfortable with typically, don't understand sometimes. And we see often that HBA members want to buy another SkyTrack, or they want to buy another truck, or they want to buy a rental property. All are just fine, but it lessens your diversification, right? So money in the stock market, this is, the stock market has worked for 230 years, right? Yes, it's volatile at times. You're going to watch your money go the wrong way for certain times, but time is on your side. And eventually, if you start early enough and you have a long enough time horizon, it will absolutely work. It does time and time and time again. That doesn't mean put all your money into it. Doesn't mean take every extra dollar you have and put it there. I would encourage people though, just because you can't touch it, you can't fix it, and you don't necessarily know it, doesn't mean it's the wrong place to go. That's not to say go into cryptocurrency or things that are really, you know, speculative or you really don't understand. But diversification between your business and your equipment and your buildings and your rental houses and your spec houses and the stock market should all come into play. Taxes. Oftentimes people are trying to save taxes this year, sometimes at the detriment of what's going to happen 20 years from now. Couple things to think of. One, we're at all-time low tax rates. We haven't seen tax rates at this level in a long, long time. And I'm not making any predictions, but my sense is that with the debt that continues to rise, at some point, they're going to have to get their money to pay for this stuff, right? We're already starting to see it with a Biden tax plan. Most people who are making under 400,000 with the Biden tax plan at this point won't get touched or won't get hit hard. But eventually things are going to start rising, I would assume, because there's no other way to go. And so I would say it is very imperative to think about what taxes are doing right now. But I would also encourage you, just like we diversify where we're invested, diversify where your tax buckets are. Have a strategy for that. Maybe some of it's going into a Roth IRA now, even though it doesn't give you the best return this year. That grows, and in retirement, the more buckets you have to pull from tax-wise, the better. Some of it's going to come from an IRA, and that's going to be taxable to you. Once you get to the next tax bracket, pull it from a Roth IRA or non-qualified money. So just make sure you don't always think of taxes in a silo of the current year. Be diversified with your tax strategy as well. Financial planning. Only thing I wanted to touch on here was just think about what your retirement looks like. Oftentimes people don't have a plan for this, but think of what's your dream at retirement? What do you want to do? Do you want to spend part of the time working, mowing greens in the morning at the golf course? Do you want to work at Menards part-time? Or do you just literally want to sit on a sailboat? All of this depends on what you're going to need at that point. That doesn't mean as life changes that you can't adjust this a little bit, but have an idea of what you want. And then once you know what you want, you can start building that plan to get to that point. And then we got to consider all of that. What does Social Security look like? Do you have a pension? Have you saved enough in the right buckets? And even though it could be 20 or 30 years away, what does it look like? What's the plan for how you're going to get money when you retire? So, and then I had a number of other considerations, and I won't belabor this. I want to kind of keep moving for you guys. Estate planning. Make sure you have your estate planning documents in place. A lot of times we hear people say, well, I don't have that much money, so I'm not going to get a trust created, or I'm not going to get a will. Wills and trusts are not necessarily have anything to do with asset levels. It has to do with being prepared if something happens to you and being able to make those you leave behind, make it easy on them. So I would encourage you, if you don't have legal documents created, to look into that. Find an estate planning attorney. There's a lot of good ones in town. And sit down and talk with them and say, hey, what does this look like? It is a cost. It's not a fun check to write. You're gonna write a $1,500 check, and they're gonna give you a binder. You're gonna put it in your fire safe and walk away, and that's it. It's not a great check to write, but it is super important, and it's something you don't have to do all the time. Once you get it done, it's pretty much done. Life insurance. Oftentimes we see either people overinsured or non-insured. and you'd be surprised at how many times we see people overinsured. So if you want to cover yourself and have it so that your heirs have $10 million if something happens to you, that's great. I often look at it as, instead of insuring your $50,000 Chevy for $50,000, you insure it for $200,000 so that just in case you wreck your truck, you can then buy a Ferrari to drive around after that. That's not what's needed. Sit down with a plan, say, what do I need to recoup or continue the lifestyle for my heirs that is currently being had? Do I want to pay for kids' college? Other things like that. Come up with a number and insure yourself for that number. But it's not expensive. Term insurance, we can say, hey, how long do I need to cover myself? You pay your annual premiums. If you don't use it, lucky you, because you're still above ground. And it was a good expense to have. But unfortunately, on the other side, we've seen a lot of times where it is used, and it is a really, really, really big piece of the financial plan. Succession planning, I was going to touch on this as business owners. This is one of the things we're seeing a ton, and we could really do a whole, 25-minute Zoom call just on succession planning. For some reason, we're seeing this a lot in our business. I'm dealing with it with a couple of different business owners in the building trades. Again, we could go deep into this. I won't right now. I would say this: if you're a business owner, make sure you have a long enough runway as you plan for succession. Don't come in January 14, 2021 and say, all right, at the end of this year, I'm going to be out and I'm going to transition my business, whether I'm going to sell it or I'm going to transition it to key employees. That's not enough time. It's not enough time for somebody to plan to buy your business, to come up with cash to buy the business. A 5-year runway for a succession is really, really helpful for everybody, not only those who are selling the business, but those who are potentially buying or key employees who want to step in. And likewise, I would say if you're a key employee, you're working for a business and you have interest in taking over this business someday, express that to the business owner. And say, hey, what does this potentially look like, even if it is 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road? Start having that conversation. The more time you have, the better. Savings, extra cash on hand. One of the things we see in a lot right now is both individuals and businesses have a fair amount of extra cash. They're not spending as much as they were. PPP came in and they didn't, business held up good, but they still could take PPP. Individuals are saying, hey, we haven't gone out to eat and we haven't traveled in almost a year. And so we've got this extra money sitting here. What do we do with it? I would encourage you to take the beginning of this year and look at what you can set aside. There are places to go where it can be liquid. Unfortunately, interest rate environment we're in right now, having it sit in the bank is typically not a great option long term. I will say all day, one of the biggest questions we get is, how much is the right amount to have in the bank? Because I'm not making anything. And my answer is there's no number that covers everybody. It's what you can sleep at night. One person will be $1 million and another person will be $5,000. And that is literally numbers that I've seen. And I would say, don't be afraid to hold some cash in the bank, even though you're not getting anything. What you have short-term should never be in the market. What you need short-term should always be liquid, risk-free, even though you're not getting anything on it. My point here would be, if you do have extra, which we're seeing a fair amount of, talk to somebody, look into that, look what that might look like long-term. All right, I'll buzz through these. I think I have 8 common mistakes we see. Some of these I've touched on already. I'll get through these. If there's questions, I'll be happy to answer questions, but I also don't want to, like I said before, I hope I'm giving you guys enough information without boring you or getting too far into the weeds. So failing to have a plan. I think this is the number one problem that we see. People say, well, I'm saving. Well, how much are you saving? Well, I've been saving 10% of my income for forever. Well, what do you have? I don't know. I don't even look at my retirement statements. What are you saving for? I'm not really sure what I'm saving for. You got to have a plan. How much am I saving? Why am I saving? Am I increasing my savings as I go? Do I need to increase it? And what am I saving for? What's my goal? Financial planning always changes particularly for younger people. If we've got 30 years or 25 years until we retire, life is going to change. The markets are going to change. Tax rates are going to change. Political environment's going to change. This is something we're always adjusting the plan, but not to have the plan at all and just close your eyes and say, let's hope we hit the dartboard isn't typically the best plan of action. Procrastination, this one is simple. So, if we can ever get a really good financial planning class in schools, this is what they'll teach the first day, right? Time value of money and compounding. So if you started saving at 40 years old versus 50, right? So somebody who starts with $20,000 at 40 years old puts $500 a month into savings and earns 7%, gets to age 65, 25 years from now, at like $488,000, right? Now you've got somebody that starts at 50, 10 years later with $20,000, saving the same amount, $500 a month, 7%, and you end up at age 65, 15 years later with $200,000, right? So that 10 years is the difference between having $500,000 and $200,000. The lesson there, we all know it. I'm not saying anything anybody doesn't know. I'm just trying to hopefully encourage, and that is start early, because you can let compounding do the heavy lifting. The later you start, the more you have to save and the harder it is. So failure to diversify, we touched on this earlier. Don't hold everything in one spot. Don't hold one stock, one ETF, one mutual fund. Don't have all your money sitting in, in stocks. Diversify it out, diversify your stocks. A lot of times we see somebody who owns a business. This isn't just the building trades. This is the business in general. This is what they know. This is what they trust. This is what has made them money. And they push everything into the business. Pay yourself first from the business. Save, pay yourself, and then reinvest into the business. That's how businesses grow. And that's how you get to retirement and say, well, if I don't sell this business, there's no way I can retire. That's not a great spot to be either, right? And so to have some liquid, to have some in stocks and in retirement savings helps take some of the pressure off some of the other things you have going. Again, I would say in this case, for those who own businesses, it takes pressure off having to sell your business to retire. Estate plan, I won't hit on this anymore. We talked about it earlier, but again, the point here would be a lot of people say, well, I don't need an estate plan because either nothing will happen to me or I don't want to talk about it. It's really not that difficult. It's one of those things you just have to do. You just have to set yourself, say, all right, I'm going to do it, make the phone call to somebody, get it going, and then it's done. Delay in life insurance. We had a client who was 50 years old. We said, hey, you need this life insurance coverage because things are going to be in bad shape. And we pressured him and pressured him. Finally got him life insurance. 12 months later, he was 50 years old. 12 months later, he is diagnosed with cancer, fights it for 3 months, and passes away. This stuff happens. It's completely unfortunate. But we all think we're invincible or we don't need it right now. this is another one of those cases where if it's something you need, go do it. And if it's not something you need or fits your financial plan, then there's no need to have it. But don't delay life insurance. Leverage expertise. I am probably dangerous enough that I could go out and build my own house right now. I've been in the business long enough. I could get it in the air, but it's not my expertise, right? I'm still going to hire somebody to build that because somebody else deals with it all the time. And I would say the same about financial planning or CPAs. This is what we do all day, every day. Sometimes when I'm asking clients for, information and it takes them a week or two to get it back to me, I get frustrated because I'm like, well, doesn't everybody think about finances all day, every day, or their personal stuff all day? Because this is a blast. And why doesn't everybody do this? Well, the reality is, most people need to hand this off. They need to hand it off to somebody who can keep them on track, who can keep them organized, who has the continuing knowledge of the changes of the industry. And so I would encourage you, just leverage the expertise of people who do this all the time, particularly a CPA. And I would find a CPA. We have many, many good ones in town, and many, or at least a couple that are HBA members. Find one that helps you project into the future, right? Not just planning for right now. CPAs or accountants or doing taxes is recording history. That's all. It's what it is, right? And a lot of times they're saying, what can I get you right now? But a good CPA will say, yes, let's do the best we can right now, and let's also project out what the next few years are going to look like, so that we can make sure we're diversified with taxes as well. Beneficiary updates. So my favorite story, this actually happens. We had a gentleman come to us who was not a client, but came to us for advice. He had been married once before, got remarried. His second spouse had passed away, and he intended to have his two daughters as his beneficiary on his $1 million IRA. The kids came to us. He passes away. His daughters come to us and say, hey, my dad's $1 million IRA went to his ex-wife that was back in the 70s. His will and his trust all says that everything he has needs to go to us, the kids. And we got attorneys involved. We went to court, and the judge said, nope. There is precedent to say anything you have on your beneficiary listed preempts any legal documents that you have. The moral of the story is make sure your beneficiaries are updated to what you want. If it's going to a spouse, make it a spouse. If your spouse passed away, make it to the kids, make it to your brother. But make sure as your life changes, those beneficiaries get updated. No matter what you've written in your will or your trust or other legal documents, the beneficiaries stand on their own and preempt any other legal stuff that you have. So don't ignore the updates there. Final one, keeping up with the Joneses. Money is inherently behavioral, right? It is really difficult. It's hard to stay in the market when the market's going down. It's hard not to get overexcited when the market's going up. It's hard not to look at your neighbor and say, how is he driving that car? Or being at a party and your buddy's like, hey, I invested in Bitcoin. I put $10,000 in there at $5 a coin, and now it's $40,000 a coin, and I made $6 million. It's hard not to try to keep up with your neighbor. Be disciplined in investing. The best formula for investing returns is to have a process and to be disciplined. Sometimes you can do that on your own. Sometimes it's best to hire somebody to do that. But really pay attention to it because money is difficult. We sit down with folks every single day and everybody's different. you know, how people are handling this current political environment, how people are handling this current economic environment, or inheritance, or watching their friend, you know, reached out to them and said they invested in this and you should do that. Don't try to keep up with the Joneses. Buy low, sell high. Don't try to beat any given market. Just be diversified and steady and have a process. I think that's really, really, really important. So that's all I've got. Feel free to ask any questions if you have them, but my info's on here. And like I said before, if you want to just shoot me a question or give me a phone call, I'm happy to answer anything you got, whether it's regarding anything I covered here, or any other questions you have. I know one that kind of came up was different provisions for COVID. And I'm happy to answer questions on that if there's a little bit more specific as to what we're dealing with there. There are provisions to say that you can get money out of your IRA before you're 59 and a half if you've been laid off or somehow inflicted by COVID. So that is a benefit. But there's a lot of things, you know, it's ever changing. There's a lot of things going on with COVID. Anything anybody has?
Thanks, Nate. Anybody have any questions? I'll start with one while everyone's getting their thoughts together. The HSA account, is that something that you can do individually? Like, let's say you're buying insurance for yourself just on the individual market. Do you have to get an HSA plan, or can you do it as long as you have a high deductible?
You can do it on your own. It does not have to be through a plan. And if you're on the marketplace getting insurance on your own, you can go down to most local banks. I think I heard Macatawa Bank on here. You can go down to most local banks and set up an HSA. Some financial services companies can do it as well. Even if you're part of a company and your company doesn't necessarily offer an HSA through them, or they don't contribute to an HSA, you can still go and open your own up at you have to be part of a qualified plan. And if you reach out to your insurance agent and say, hey, does my plan qualify for an HSA? They'll be able to tell you right off the bat, yes or no. It's usually right in the plan document.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else have any questions?
Thanks, guys.
Well, Nate, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. This is some great information. And if you do have questions, but you were too shy to bring them up, you can contact Nate directly. His contact information is there on the screen. But again, thank you so much for the information.
You're welcome.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day.
Thank you.